Today's day 81, but thank goodness I'm done, and I'm packing my bags and heading back to Scotland with the family later on. I've done quite a lot of work since yesterday with Laura and with Dr. Andrew Murray, doctor back in Scotland, and the other wider support team, performance team, figuring out what the next month in particular looks like. So some of that might be of interest. Thankfully I'm allowed a week off the bike. I get to chill out for a week, and then I really need to start and get some quality sleep and recovery and hydrate well and all the rest of it. And then I need to have a proper program. I need to get back on the bike. But it's quite hilarious comparing my training program beforehand to my training program afterwards. You know, I'm used to looking at these spreadsheets and it says, you know, do a whatever brutal session and a hard session or a long session, and now I'm looking at it and it says go for 2 30-minute walks or ride your bike for an hour. It just looks wonderful. So I'm quite looking forward to my training down. I've got to stay active. I need to normalise my fitness. I can already feel it's a bit sore in my lower back, and I'm not used to walking that much, but I'm sure I'll be absolutely fine. I need to get a DEXA scan, so see my bone composition, the full body makeup in terms of fat and muscle. I need to get an MRI scan, so a detailed x-ray with soft tissue as well on my left elbow, see what's going on there. I need to get bloods done, again, just make sure where I am, you know, where my immune system is, iron levels, all those things. And trying to think, yeah, there's quite a few other things to happen. I'll eventually get back into the sports lab and do some performance testing and just see where I am. I'm sure I've lost my top end in terms of performance, that sort of power and speed, but you know, I've been really sort of building that base level, the ability to ride at, you know, zone 1 for 16 hours a day. So it'd be really interesting to see where I am in terms of performance off the back of this. But yeah, I'll keep chatting over the coming weeks and months as to how the winding down goes from this, and an amazing performance team around me. So thanks for their hard work. I thought I would also sort of pause and reflect on the fact that, you know, I might have just cycled around the world in 80 days, but there's an amazing history of people cycling around the world and doing circumnavigations. And even the Guinness World Record has evolved a lot over the last 10, 20 years. So the criteria that stands now, which says you've got to go 18,000 miles, hit points on the opposite side of the world, always go in the same direction, I mean, a whole bunch of criteria, is different even from when I went around the world 10 years ago. The biggest difference between then and now is flight times, transit between continents, are included in the record now, whereas 10 years ago they were not. So as of 2013, it's actually got harder in that sense, because if I'd wanted to cycle around the world in 80 days 10 years ago, I would have only had to average 225 miles a day because flights would have been on the top. But to do it around the world in 80 days, including flights, brings you up to my target of 240 miles a day. But I could obviously only do something like this, you know, building on the success and hard work of what many other people have done in the past. And, you know, it's absolutely right to stop and reflect and acknowledge that. There's also a big difference between cycling around the world and doing a circumnavigation. You know, many people have cycled around the world but never left the northern hemisphere. To do a circumnavigation, you have to go more than the distance of the equator and hit 2 points on the opposite side of the world. So again, that doesn't take away from any of the amazing around the world cycles that have happened, but there's much stricter criteria if you want to do a full circumnavigation. I mean, take that to its extreme and you could cycle around the flag at the North Pole and go around the world. You know, that's obviously not what people do, but you know, that's why the strict rules around what Guinness World Record do now, and it's got fine-tuned. The other big difference is, obviously, I've gone fully supported this time, and I've made no pretense of the fact that I'm going, you know, as a professional, fully supported race. You know, this is just about performance. I'm not claiming this time to be an adventurer or a wild man out there. I've done that 10 years ago, loved it, and it's quite hard to compare both trips. But, you know, this time for me, it was just about performance. There's a distinction between team and solo, and there's a distinction between the male and the female record, but there is no distinction, as there stands at the moment, between supported and unsupported. So the chap who held the record before, Andrew Nicholson from New Zealand, did the trip on a shoestring and did it pretty much unsupported. So I completely acknowledge that was a phenomenal ride, incredibly fast, but fundamentally a completely different trip. And I respect that, and I think it's worth saying, because when you're cycling around the planet, yes, I'm trying to break the Guinness World Record, but you're only really racing yourself. You're going for your personal best. You know, I'm absolutely going out there and trying to figure out what I'm, you know, so that's why I set the 80-day target and went for that. But I mean, I can remember when I went for the record 10 years ago, you know, I looked up to people like, you know, Nick Sanders and Andrew Slodowski and Steve Strange and people who had gone before, all cycled slightly different distances, under different rules, done different things. When I went for the record, it stood at 276 days. I brought it down to 194, and then since I went for it, people like, you know, Vin Cox and Steve Strange and Mike Hall and Juliana Buring and many of these names that you'll know have gone for the record and done different things. So I think there's a pretty amazing legacy around the world and circumnavigation cycling, and yeah, the bottom line is they're all quite distinct and they're all pretty amazing, and they're all people who have gone out there and pedaled their bike around the planet. So chapeau to anyone who takes on that challenge. I really hope in the future people try and break my record. That's what it's there for. But yeah, right now, packing my bags, leaving the hotel, looking forward to getting back to Scotland later on this afternoon.